Hey everybody, good afternoon, whatever time it is, whenever you're listening to this. Never a bad time for maths anyway. Middle of the night, puts you to sleep. In the morning, bit of energy. So today, we are interpreting transition matrices. So here's the transition matrix in question. We're told that the following transition matrix in its transition diagram can be used to describe the weekly pattern of rental cars being returned to three locations: Albury, Wodonga, Benalla. And you can see that looks sort of complex, not complex, but just messy. But when we pop it into T, it's a little bit easy to understand. But not only that, we can use it down the track to monitor the movement of cars between these particular branches of rental car companies. So to start with, we're going to do some basic interpreting of the information coming out of that matrix. So part A, what percentage of cars rented in Wodonga each week are predicted to be returned to Albury, Benalla and Wodonga? So we're talking about that. So you can see it says return to here, which means that a little piece up here. So up there, it's rented from. So that's the starting one. And that means that in the question, what percentage of cars were rented in Wodonga? So we're worried about this column, okay? And then how that relates to where they're returned to, right there. So we're given that as a proportion or a decimal. So part 1, 2, and 3 is to start with. So Albury is 0.05, and hopefully our percentages are okay. And we know that 0.05 times 100 is equal to 5%, okay, because it's asking for the answer as a percentage, so we don't want to give it as a decimal. Next, we've got 0.8, that translates to 80%, and then 0.15, which is 15%. Part B, 200 cars were rented in Albury this week. How many of these do we expect to be returned to Albury, Benalla, Wodonga? Okay, so let's get rid of that now. We are concentrating on Albury's column here. Okay, and we know that's based on the question. 200 cars were rented, so we'll do the full working for the first one. And 200 cars were rented in Albury, and how many of these were returned to Albury, Benalla and Wodonga? So part 1 is Albury to Albury, so we know that 70% of those, 0.7 as the decimal, we can keep it there. So we've got 200 times 0.7, okay, and 70% of that I know is 140. Okay, part 2. Now, part 2 is actually for part 1, I've actually got that incorrect. If we look at these, they've got to be swapped because I've done it in order of A, W, and B, but they've got it in the order of Albury, Benalla, Wodonga. Okay, so obviously be careful with that when you're answering these questions. I'm looking to skip through it a bit faster than what I reasonably should. The next one is Benalla. So Benalla, how many of those cars are returned to Benalla? So down the bottom here, 20% or 0.2. So 200 times 0.2 is equal to 40. 40 cars are returned. And last of all, how many are returned to Wodonga? So 0.1 or 10%. And we know that that is 20. Okay. Now, our little check here, we want to make sure that they should all add up to 20 200. And I can tell you they do. Okay. Part C. What percentage of cars rented in Benalla each week are not expected to be returned to Benalla? Okay, so just a small change in that we've got. Okay, what is not expected to return? So in Benalla, if 77% of cars are returned to Benalla, there's a couple of ways we can do this depending on the amount of information you got. If you've got a massive matrix you're working with, you might want to simply go, okay, we know that that column adds to 100%, subtract Benalla's amount, it'll find these two. Or in a small one like this, you can also just add the percentages that go elsewhere. So, for instance, let's do 100, take 77, and that will give us 23%. Okay, so that means we've got 23% of cars don't return to Benalla. Like I said, and that coincides with the fact that we had the 0.12 and 0.11, that equals 0.23 or 23%. Last of all, 160 cars were rented in Albury this week. How many of these cars are expected to be returned to Benalla or Wodonga? Okay, so we're looking at Albury, and we're looking at how many of those cars end up in Benalla or Wodonga. So Benalla or Wodonga is 0.1 and 0.2. So 30% or 0.3 of the cars, which was 160, are returned to Wodonga or Benalla. Okay, so 10%, for instance, is 16. If we go 3 times 16, we get 48. So we have 48 cars. Returned to B or W, Benalla or Wodonga. Okay. So hopefully that's a little bit of help on how we interpret the transition matrix. We've already done some work on putting a diagram into a matrix. It's a case of going, okay, where are we starting? Where do we get to? Okay, so from the columns to the rows. Hope that was helpful, gang. Have a beautiful afternoon, evening. Hope the sun's shining somewhere. And we'll see you next time on the channel. Like it, subscribe to it, etc. You know the drill. See you again.